Alright, I'll start off by saying that this will not be a regular thing. I don't do commentary on speedruns and I find it rather stressful. Well, excuse me for any auditory deficits since I don't have any specialized gear for voice recording and this is basically my first time. Anyways, I've done a Scythe of Amon speedrun with Abathur pretty recently and I realized that this could be a faster experience farming method on random queue than void thrashing, and more consistent with enemy race RNG. So with Scythe of Amon, I typically finish between 8:30 and 9:30 on pubs, with the best enemy race being Zerg and the worst being either Protoss or Terran. I'm not exactly sure which one is worse. They seem to be the same. And the most inconsistent part is the partner. The partner's commander choice will often have you racing and killing the wrong slivers. But even then, in the worst case scenarios, I get delayed to about 11 to 12 minutes, which is still around void thrashing times on the worst case scenario for void thrashing, so it's not too bad. And most partners are generally not good enough to actually compete with you in racing unless they get commanders like Zeratul. Usually Zeratul is an auto quit. And commanders like Raynor and Stukov have cooldowns that are problematic. They're pretty high DPS. But you can distract them by having them waste the cooldowns on the first enemy wave. Or you can just try communicating with them. I usually don't have to. I can race them fairly well, but communication shouldn't hurt. Anyways, it's still been pretty consistent and faster overall than void thatching, which is why I'm starting to farm experience on this map on pubs when I don't have a partner for lock and load. And yeah, worse the partner, the better it will be for you. The partner usually won't have any idea what you're doing, and will mostly get his units killed as you're winning the races, and the sliver powers just completely screw over your partner's units. The masteries I use are full toxic nest damage, full symbiote, and a 5-25 split on the nest charges and structure morph speed. That's pretty standard for ultimate rushing and Abathur speedrunning. Okay, so for the actual run-through, I send out the first drone right away as the game starts, and I don't build anything else. I want the first 150 minerals to be used for the Roach Warren. And yeah, I laid 3 nests in this location. This one is going to be used for the mini base up here, and these 2 close ones are going to be used for the sliver defenders. Here you get one major difference between the races. Against Terran, you're going to have bunkers in these areas, which makes it difficult for farming biomass off of the encampment here. Whereas against Protoss and Zerg, you do want to pull everything from here to the nest to get as much biomass as possible. And once the roach warren pops, you should have enough minerals for your first spore and your first roach basically right after. And make sure to turn off autocast for all of your early luring. Yeah, and as you're luring with your spore, you want to lay the rest of your toxic nests right below this rift. That way you'll be catching all the biomass that comes out of there. And you should note that Terran has more initial defenders in this area compared to Zerg and Protoss. And I think that kind of makes up for the lack of early easy biomass from the Terran encampment here. Alright, and as you finish this initial sequence, you should note that you have 100 minerals. This is really easy to forget. You do want to get your first Overlord very quickly, And do not forget this. It's really easy to forget. I've forgotten plenty of times while learning to do the speed run. Eventually, you'll get into the habit. Any delay you get on your second and third roaches, I mean, you don't want to be delayed in general. Alright, and move the spore crawler to the side. You won't be using it for now, but make sure to hotkey it. You're going to be repositioning it later for another trick. Okay, so now the roach is gonna finish the luring. And yeah, Terran, it's terrible for biomass. Try to lure as much as you can, but it's not very useful here. And you can see the lack of biomass really showing. It's delaying the first Brutalist pretty heavily. So now, against Terran specifically, you still want to clear out these two bunkers, because another difference I noticed was that against Terran, the defenders at the Expo Sliver are slightly less than against Zerg and Protoss. I'm not sure exactly why, but there is a little bit less biomass here, so you still want to destroy these two bunkers. And I lay the nests here so that I can detonate them after the bunkers have been destroyed. You don't really have to do it, you still get enough biomass, but still worth doing. Oh yeah, and around this time you should be getting your gases and your other roaches. Typically, the order of the units that I build after the Roachborn, I build the Spore Crawler, then Roach, Drone, Overlord. Then, once that Overlord pops, I build the second Roach, then 3 drones, then the third Roach, than the 2 gases. I think that's the most important part in the build order. And that should get all the roaches out in time for the Brutalists at the stages of luring. Anyways, after this encampment, you go into the Expo Sliver. And here, you use a different luring method. You saw that over here. I let the nests finish before I started luring with the Spore Crawler, and that's because I don't have the Spore Crawler available by the time the nests finish. Over here, it's more efficient to lay the nest slightly behind the Brutalisk as it is charging forward, and then lure the enemies into the nests. Alright, and that should get you enough biomass for your second Brutalisk. Okay, and don't forget your lair. It should be going up at around this time. Then here is the first very important trick. You do want to finish killing off the rest of the stuff here, but you want to have at least one nest alive here just for the creep later on. And you want to destroy this rift so it doesn't build any more units. And another thing that I do is I move the Spore Crawler up, and I don't root it, I just have it holding position near the sliver. For some reason, if you have that Spore Crawler just staring at it, it'll very severely delay the sliver spawning another rift. And that makes it much easier later on when you come back to it, because it won't have any defenders that you have to fight. And that is very important for the speed run, but it's also an easy step to forget. So you'll have to get into the habit of moving the Spore Crawler over here. And don't root it, because if it's attacking the sliver, and once the sliver powers change, if it changes to something like the blue circle, then the sliver will start attacking the Spore Crawler. So that's why I keep it unrooted, so that it's not drawing any aggro, but it's also preventing further rifts from spawning for a while. And you can see that the first attack wave is almost here, and that's because I was delayed by the bunkers. Against Protoss and Zerg, you should have time to get your third Brutalisk and move all of them to the first sliver, which is the western one here, and attack it a little bit before you have to deal with this first attack wave. But in this case, yeah, I had to deal with it before attacking the west sliver. It's not too bad. But if you're racing against your partner, it might be significant. Okay, so I tunneled all of them to the left side of the first real sliver. And that's because most of the defenders are on the right side, and attacking from the left will force them to come to you. And that will clump them up so that your Brutalist Cleave can work on them, and you can also lay nests underneath them as needed. Okay, and you only need to take out this bottom rift here. There is another one up on top, but you don't need to kill it because it doesn't produce units in time to actually make much of a difference by the time you kill the sliver. And you probably just heard the Spire finishing, so this is around the time when your Spire will be finishing, so make sure you have control groups and start Mutalisk production. And you want your Mutalisk to follow a pretty specific path. You want them to go to this mini base that you cleared out and then up towards around here. Against Zerg, there's a Terran mini base in this area that has a science vessel, which tends to irradiate your mutas if they get too close or if you get unlucky with pathing. So it's recommended that you keep at least one mend available around the time that your first muta pops so that you can use it if it gets irradiated. Oh, and another important thing. You can see that the Brutalisk are using their anti-air attack, which has higher DPS than their anti-ground, not counting the cleave. So keep them out of melee range, but in range of their symbiotes for maximum damage output. Okay, and then the second sliver. So I deep tunneled the brutes to a little like bottom leftish of the second sliver, and that's puts you in reach of the two void rifts. And here I send two healthy brutes to actually attack the enemy, while I send the hurt one to specifically attack the rifts. This way you draw aggro away from the hurt Brutalisk, and you spread the damage to the two healthy ones. And you slowly push them forward. And by the time the healthy brutes get to this Void Rift here, you should have drawn basically all the defenders. So this is around the time when it's safe to put in a few nests if you want to detonate them. And keep in mind that against Protoss, you are going to have some cannons in this bottom area and like another cannon on top. In this case, you do want to move more methodically. The cannons do a lot of damage to brutes, and in that case, you want to slowly push with all three brutes instead of having one on rift duty. So clear the rifts one at a time, destroy the enemy slowly, and move towards this area together. And the one on rift duty gets deep tunneled to the upper right rift here. And once most of the defenders are gone, this is when you should be finally securing this second sliver. And get rid of the remaining rifts. And yeah, this one is a newly spawned rift, the one on the upper left. So in total, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rifts to kill. And if you've done everything right, you should have your Brutalisk in a triangle formation around the sliver. And this is also good in case the second sliver's power is the blue circle, then you don't have the Brutalisk all clumped up. And this is also around the time when your first Mutalisk reaches the area that you want them to go to. So you do want to have the area secured so that the Brutalisk can just auto-attack this second sliver, because there is a very specific path that your Mutalisk has to follow in order to stay safe. And here you can see that I have the Evolved Leviathan on auto-cast. Against Zerg, you probably want to disable it so that it just collects the biomass from here and use the Mutalisk speed to get to this third sliver, because your Brutalists are probably going to kill it before you can actually make use of the biomass here. But against Terran, I do want the extra DPS against Terran and Protoss, so I keep it on auto-cast and have it auto-evolve to a Leviathan here in order to squeeze that extra DPS. Okay, you also have the second Mutalisk out. Here, this one is kind of optional. I decided to move the second Mutalisk here to collect the biomass because it's probably going to be late in coming here anyways. It's not exactly required. This area also has enough biomass to get your second Leviathan anyways. But if you do bring this Mutalisk over to the second sliver area, you do get your third Leviathan out slightly earlier, but then your second Leviathan will be a little late to the party for the third sliver. So it's optional. You don't have to do it. Okay, so after the second sliver, I deep tunnel the Brutalisk to the bottom left of the third sliver. And again, this will draw out most of the aggro. And here, again, you want to send the most hurt Brutalisk to attack this rift to draw the aggro away and use the other two to tank. And you want to put in basically all of your nests to try to kill this Ultralisk. It tanks quite a bit, and you also want the extra biomass. But I think in this case I messed up. Yeah, I didn't target this rift. But you should try to. Okay, so the Leviathan has arrived. And I tunnel the brutes up here after killing the defenders here, because you still want to get rid of the rifts. These rifts will spawn banshees and also battle cruisers later on. So you really want these rifts gone, otherwise they start spawning annoying units. And here you should be getting your second Leviathan. And now, this is when you make use of all the preparation you did on this closest sliver. Now I'm using up all my resources to build spore crawlers around this place, and as you can see, there are still no defenders because of this lone spore crawler that's been glaring at the sliver the whole time. But also around this time, the void sliver will finally get back to its senses and spawn a void rift. It's going to be around this region here. So I deep tunnel a single Brutalisk to this area. Any moment now. Yep, and I kill it. Oh, and I actually think it spawned another one here out of vision. But anyways, you do want to kill the void rifts before they start spawning stuff and attacking your spores. And if you have enough time, you can deep tunnel that Brutalisk back to here to continue attacking. But in this case, the DPS was too fast and I didn't need to. And yeah, there's the other Void Rift. And get rid of that as quickly as possible. And then the two Leviathans should be sent to the final sliver area to clear the defenders while the Brutalisk and the Spore Crawlers attack the fourth sliver. And yeah, I got the third Leviathan. Usually you need the biomass from this area to get your third Leviathan. But that's the benefit of sending 2 Mutalisks over here instead of 1. And yeah, against Zerg, you ideally don't have to handle this second attack wave, but I will slow down due to the enemy race. And with the 4th sliver gone, you want to uproot all of your spore crawlers, and then deep tunnel your brutalists to the final area for the final assault. Now you want to lay the rest of your toxic nest on this upper right area of the sliver. It's out of range of the siege tanks that like to spawn on the other side here. And so you have creep for planting these spore crawlers. And even the spore crawlers aren't really necessary. You can just take down the sliver without them, but it's a bit of optimization. And then once you have the spore crawlers rooted, just right click on the final sliver and it'll die. So yeah, a little under 9 minutes, even against Terran. Could have been, I think this is close to the best case for Terran. Usually against Terran it's more towards over 9 minutes. But I think the addition of DPS from Stetman helped. But yeah, your ally mostly won't be helping you because a lot of allies don't have the sense to actually get to these areas and assist you. They'll mostly be racing you on killing the sliver here or here. And they're generally going to be confused on what you're doing. But as long as you can beat your partner in the DPS race, it shouldn't matter. It'll mostly play like a solo run. And it's very consistent. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what to do. I'm not really going to cover the specifics of other races beyond what I told you here because it does get quite tedious trying to get all the details of the other races. But just know that Zerg is the fastest and you should do it slightly differently to account for it. And Protoss is also quite annoying in exactly how you assault the slivers because of the cannons that they throw into the mix. So yeah, I guess that's it. Have fun grinding if you want to use this method.